Hi, welcome to your video on interest. You will be able to solve problems using simple and compound interest, which you will learn about here in just a second. What is the formula for simple interest? Well, there's kind of two, and I'll explain what I mean in just a second. The formula for finding the interest is I equals P times R times T. And each of those stand for something special. The I stands for interest. So the interest equals your principal times your interest rate times, and I'm running out of room here, times the amount of time and years. So a couple words that you might not be familiar with. Principal, that's your starting amount. So however much money you have at the beginning. So that's important to recognize. And then your time is expressed in years. Now, on IXL and different problems that you solve, it might just ask you for the interest. If it does, you're just going to plug in your principal amount, multiply that by your interest rate. And I should mention this is as a decimal. And then time is measured in years. Sometimes it will just ask you for what the interest is, how much money you're making on it. But sometimes it'll ask you for the balance. And when it asks you for the balance, you have to use and take one more step. So you find the interest, but then you have to find what the balance is. To find the balance, and this is B equals P plus I, you're going to take your balance, that's equal to your principal, your starting amount, and add your interest. So you're going to use the previous equation like I showed you, this one right here. You'll solve that, and then you'll plug in and you'll add your principal to your interest to find what your total balance is. So how much you're making, that's why you're adding there. You just have to pay attention to what the question's asking for. So how do I solve problems using simple interest? Here's a problem, so make sure you get this down. Zoe has $50 in her savings account. The interest rate is 8% per year. How much will she have in 2 years? So how much money will she have, not just the interest? So we have to find her balance and the interest. So we're going to use those formulas. The first one was I equals P times R times T. I is what we're trying to find. P, that's principal, your starting amount, and if I read the problem, her starting amount was $50. Then I'm going to multiply that by the interest rate, which was 8%, but remember that has to be written as a decimal. So that's actually 0.08, because percent is out of 100, so it needs to be in the hundredths place. So that's the number I'm going to write for the R space. And then multiply it by time. Time is measured in years, and the question is asking for how much she'll have in 2 years. So time is 2, because it's 6% per year, so 2 years time. So then we multiply all of this together. So 50 times 800ths times 2, which will give you an answer of 8. So your interest is $8. That means she earned $8 more in that 2 years. Then you have to take and answer the real question, which is how much money will she have in 2 years. So now I have to take my balance. My balance is my principal amount, what I started with, and then I add on that interest that I earned. And so my principal was, we already found out, was 50, and interest we know is 8. So I'm going to add those together, and that's going to give me my balance. So the balance is $58. She made $58 total. That's how much money she now has after 2 years. The other type of formula you might see, or type of interest is compound interest. This requires you to use b equals p, and then in parentheses 1 plus r times t to the x power. And then I have here the interest equals the balance minus the principal. Depending upon what the question is asking for is what you're going to do. You will always start with this problem here, finding with the balance, and then if it asks you for how much interest, then you would go to this next step. And I will break down what each of these mean for you quick. Here we have balance equals your principal, and that's being multiplied. The 1 is always there, it never changes. Rate, which is your interest rate, and then the t is to the time, the power of your time. Now, a couple of things. Principal is your starting amount. Balance is then your ending amount. Interest rate is as a decimal, always, always, and time is in years. So just make sure you are noting those important details, because they will be helpful when we solve the problems. This one right here is interest equals your balance minus your principal. Okay, so in other words, your interest is your ending amount subtracted by your starting amount. All right, so how do I solve problems using compound interest? Here's the question. Make sure you get this down. Bill has $10 in a savings account that earns 12% interest compounded annually. Annually means once a year. And then how much interest will he earn in just 1 year? So we are going to start with our original, which is b equals p, parentheses 1 plus r to the power of t. Balance is our ending, which is what we're trying to find. Then p is our principal, that's our starting amount. He started with $10. So b equals 10. And then this 1 plus is always there. And then R is our interest rate in years. It says 12% and it's compounded annually, which means it's once per year. If it was like semi-annually, that means twice a year, then you would have to take that into account. But you don't have to worry about that by too much. So my interest rate in a decimal would be 12% would be 0.12. And then my time is in years. So how many times is that compounded? It is compounded just that once a year. So the t then is going to be the number 1. Now that I do this, now I follow order of operations rules to solve the problem. So my first thing I have to do is parentheses. So now I have 10 parentheses 1.12 to the first power. The next rule is exponents. So I have to take the 1.2 to the first power, which is just 1.2. So now I have b equals 10 times 1.12. And now that will give me my final answer. B is 10 times that 1.12, which is 11.2. Now we're talking about money, so that means $11.20 is now the balance. And to find how much interest he earned, that's where we take it to the next level using that other equation. So the interest is your balance minus your principal. And so he ended, I should say, his balance was $11.20. And then his principal, what he started with, was $10. And so if I subtract that, I can clearly see that the interest was 1.2 if I use a calculator or mental math, but we're talking about money, so it would be $1.20 is the amount of interest that was there. This is the end. There is no practice problems for you to do because you will be doing that with me. Thanks for watching.